Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit, a part of Ahval video podcast series. My guest today is Professor Henri Barkey from Washington, D.C., professor with Lehigh University for a long time, and also senior analyst with Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome, Henri.
Thank you.
Today, we are not going to talk about Turkey's foreign policy or Turkish-American relations, which we usually do with you, but we will talk about you as a suspect in an indictment, recent indictment, a remarkable indictment indeed, because it points out to two people, two prominent figures, personalities. One is philanthropist, businessman Osman Kavala, who remains in jail since October 18, 2017, 3 years now almost, because we are now talking to you with each other in October 13. And the indictment also points out to you, together with Osman, and you are accused of spying and also for attempts to overthrow the government, Turkish government. For this, the prosecutor asks 3 times aggravated lifetime sentence for each and every one of you, plus 20 years of imprisonment in addition. 64 pages long indictment received a lot of reactions from Turkey's human rights defenders, lawyers, and recently, some days ago, the family of Osman Kavala, together with his lawyers, after the acceptance of the indictment, whose first session is dated to mid-December, just before Christmas, and they reacted heavily, intensely, harshly against this indictment, which they called sort of a slaughter of the law, in terms something like that. And I want to hear your reactions about this, because you are the second suspect, and there's a lot of publication, negative publication about both of you in Turkish media.
Look, I read the indictment, the 64-page indictment. I think this is the kind of indictment that will go into the annals of jurisprudence worldwide as probably the most ridiculous indictment ever written. They have no proof of any of the accusations that they make. Everything that they say is conjecture. The fact that, for instance, I happened to be in Istanbul at a certain time, anytime, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I travel to Turkey.
You are a frequent traveler to Turkey. You have
right. I'll come to that. But so let's say I'm in Istanbul on May 12th on a certain year, and they cannot find any connection between me and Osman. But what they use as evidence that we have been collaborating, the fact that our telephones were in the same vicinity. I may be in Taksim, which is one district in Istanbul, and Osman may be in Şişli, and our telephones were captured by the same base stations. That is proof that we must have been doing something. There may be another 100,000 or 500,000 people in that part of the city. It's a large city after all.
It's an indictment partly based on guessing game, basically.
Yes. I mean, they have nothing, and so they have accusations which are even more absurd than that. They find that when I was in Turkey in one of my travels, on a certain date went to Adana. The same day, Osman left for Paris. Okay, so I'm in Adana, he's in Paris. That's suspicious. That must be that we must have been planning something, right? So anything we do, even if I have breakfast one morning, that will be proof that you are you're involved in some plot. The whole indictment is that they also accuse me of having participated in the planning of the Gezi protests of 2013, but they admit that they have absolutely no proof that I was involved in it, but my behavior was suspicious. Therefore, I must have been involved in the Gezi protest. This is the kind of indictment that the Turkish state a state that's always is very proud of saying that it has a 600-year tradition of statecraft. This is the indictment that they managed to produce. They introduce little things. A phone call that I made to my office at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, that was suspicious. My office. I had to talk to our departmental secretary. The fact that my wife called me on my cell phone when I was in Turkey. I think she will probably have been in Turkey at the same time, so she was calling me. That was suspicious. By the way, my wife, they say that well, Ellen Leibson claims that she is my wife, but they haven't been able to ascertain the fact whether or not she's my wife. But we slept in the same hotel room, apparently.
So like alleged wife of Henri Barkey or something.
Right. So I mean, it's not that the accusation is absurd. It's also the details they introduce in the indictment. I mean, details that have nothing to do with anything, right? And so, if to them, the fact that I come to Turkey, I used to actually, I haven't been there since 2016, obviously. The fact that I've traveled to Turkey often is suspicious. Well, I'm an academic. I work on Turkey. I write on Turkey. Like me, there are many other academics or think tankers who also travel very often to Turkey. This is our business. This is what we do. But that's suspicious, right? That I travel so often to Turkey. But I'm working on Turkey. I mean, how am I going to write on Turkey if I don't travel to Turkey and if I don't interview people, whether it is government officials, newspaper folks, think tankers, anybody, opposition politicians? I've interviewed a whole series of Turkish government officials over the years, and I had great access to them.
You know, most of them, yes.
Right. So what is so suspicious about doing my job? By the way, the other interesting thing is that they list, for example, 4 places where I suppose I had a work relationship. They say I worked at the State Department for 2 years. Yes, I did. I was in a policy planning staff. Then
during Clinton administration.
During the Clinton administration, Madeleine Albright's when she was Secretary of State, and then they mentioned the fact that I was at Carnegie for a while. Yes, I had an affiliation with the Carnegie Endowment as an adjunct scholar. Then they mentioned the fact that I was at the Wilson Center, which I was. I was the head of the Middle East program for 2 years at the Wilson Center, and also mentioned the fact that I'm now at the Council on Foreign Relations as a scholar. What they don't mention in all of this is the fact that I've been a professor at Lehigh University for 33 years. With the exception of a few years, either I was on sabbatical or I was working at State or Wilson, I have been at Lehigh all this time. So they don't even mention that, right? So the whole thing is so sloppy.
And also linked with some parts of the Turkish media, not only pro-government media, but also parts of the marginalized nationalist Turkish media. You have been for a long time labeled as a CIA agent. And it's sort of a label that never goes away, sort of
Yes.
stuck on you. So this is also sort of linked with that. And nothing helped so far to sort of stave it off from.
Right. I mean, so in Turkey, and I should say it's not just in Turkey. I mean, many other countries do the same thing. I mean, Greece used to be like this. I mean, Greece has evolved quite a bit since. But I remember Greece in the bad old days where they would attack people of being a CIA agent, and it would stick to them. But in Turkey, for some reason, I mean, once you're labeled as a CIA agent, that becomes part of the truth. So how do I prove I'm not a CIA agent? I should go maybe to the CIA and say, please give me a piece of paper that says I'm not a CIA agent. And of course, if I get that piece of paper, of course they won't give me a piece of paper like this. If they give me a piece of paper like this, then they will say, of course the CIA gave him a piece of paper to conceal the fact that he's a CIA agent. I mean, you cannot essentially escape that. I mean, it's idiotic.
Becomes permanent.
Right, of course. Of course, maybe I should ask the CIA to give me a salary. I mean, since I'm you know, but this notion that I'm a CIA agent is also absurd in the sense that how am I a CIA agent if I go to work at Lehigh University, and I've been doing that for 33 years. And by the way, Lehigh University is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It is 200 miles plus from, maybe 250 miles from where the CIA is. How am I doing? I must be a great agent if I can be both at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and teach and have lots of students and publish. I don't know. I mean, look, it makes the sad thing about this is what they don't realize is when people look at Turkey and look at them from the outside, serious people, essentially, basically end up having a very negative impression of Turkey. Right? This is beyond.
I read the indictment. You know, it reminded me of 1934, 1935, with the prosecutor Andrei Vyshinsky during Stalin. All these the links that makes people who are suspects suspicious, like Bukharin, all of these, the enemies of the state, the enemies of the regime, enemies of the great Soviet Republic, etc. So the construction, the mindset behind this has great many striking similarities between those times and now. This is what my impression is from reading that indictment, but also the indictments even before that, like Gezi indictment, again involving Osman Kavala, before this very indictment, has the same spirit. So, but a lot of people outside, abroad, do not really know, I believe, the very day that the indictment links you to the sort of plot of overthrowing the government, which is July 15, 2016, the botched coup taking place Friday night, 15th of July. And then you were in Istanbul at that time. Indictment says that. But you were there for a sort of a joint think tank meeting, conference organized in one of the Prince Islands, which is sort of off the limits of Istanbul, the very Istanbul. Yes?
Yes.
So, well, please, shed light on what happened in those 2 days or 3 days, the weekend.
So at the time I was at the Wilson Center, and we had a grant to work on the impact of President Obama's agreement or deal, nuclear deal with Iran. And the idea was to look at the reaction in the Middle East to the nuclear deal. Who's against, who's in favor, what kind of, how do they react, how they are going to behave, etc. So this was a meeting with Middle Easterners. Right? Sure, there's some Americans, but instead of bringing everybody all the way from the Middle East to Washington, which would have been much costlier, I decided to do it in Istanbul. Everybody likes to come to Istanbul. Besides, I decided to take advantage of this since I was the boss and I could decide which hotel and where I was going to hold the conference. I decided to do in Büyükada, one of the Princess Islands, which used to be essentially the place where I spent all my youth and loved the place. So I decided to organize it in Büyükada.
It's also placid settings for a conference.
I know, and the truth is, I'll tell you another reason why I did it there is because one of the things you always worry in conferences in cities like Istanbul, Paris, etc., is that the people who come to the conference will be tempted to go and meet others. Will have meetings. When you're in Büyükada, you're like an hour away from the city, so it's not that easy to escape the conference setting, right? So that was another reason. But this was a conference that I organized with a Turkish think tank. It's a conference that we advertised. We knew, people knew about it. I actually even told the number 2 at the Turkish embassy before leaving. I said, I'm going to Istanbul. I'm going to organize this conference. So if I was going to organize a coup, would I tell everybody that I was doing this? But it doesn't matter. I mean, logic is not. But anyway, the important thing, 2 important outcomes of this. One is that the coup happened Friday night. When the coup failed, I decided to proceed with the conference since we had spent so much money to organize it. The conference ended on Sunday. I went to Istanbul. Monday night, I went to a restaurant, my favorite restaurant in Istanbul, Karaköy. And as I walked in, I bumped into Osman Kavala, who was having dinner. I was going to have dinner with a friend of mine. And
Kavala was having dinner with some European friends.
Some Europeans, yeah, some Europeans. So he sees me, he gets up, he introduces me to them. The truth is, I don't know Osman very well. I mean, we've met many, many, many years ago, actually through my sister, and maybe occasionally bumped into each other in conferences. But we've known each other. So he was polite and he got up and talked to me for a few minutes, and then I went and had dinner. So they've used that chance encounter to link Osman to me. I mean, again, a chance encounter, an unfortunate chance encounter for him and also for me.
Now, this is how we ended up in the indictment.
Right.
Basically.
That's how. Right. And then I left Istanbul to come back to the United States. And 2 days after I arrived here, I started seeing a campaign start in the Turkish press about how I was one of the organizers of the coup. Well, that developed and then ended up with me, newspaper headlines, front page, etc. But it was very obvious why that campaign was started. That campaign was initiated by the Turkish government with one purpose only. They wanted to be able to say, at least domestically, that the United States was behind the coup. The only piece that they could connect the US government to this event was the fact that I had been there and I was a former government official. Therefore, the United States must have been involved in the coup. Mind you, there's an American embassy in Turkey. There are plenty of American consulates. There are plenty of American diplomats in. So why didn't they use those people? Why the United States would use me to but that you should not look for logic. But it was essentially a propaganda campaign to connect the United States so that the Erdogan governments could say over and over the United States was involved and do it for domestic purposes. And so that's the genesis, if you want, of the accusations.
So you are where you are right now. Osman Kavala is in jail, and both of you face this trial, which will be another sort of tragicomical, spectacular spectacle for many people from abroad. But it's a process. So what do you intend to do? I mean, because this is part of these sort of endless trials that has been taking place in Turkey, where, according to Human Rights Watch, there are nearly 50,000 political prisoners, Osman being one of them, prominent figure. What do you intend to do as Henri Barkey?
Look, when the accusations started, I wrote, back in 2016, I wrote an article for the New York Times. But since then, I haven't really done much for 2 reasons. One, because what am I going to say? This is nonsense. This is nonsense. How many times can you say the same thing? And generally, I'm an academic. I don't like to talk about myself. Second, if you gave credence to this, I mean, you essentially would be making these accusations even more real if you engage them. So I decided to completely
You provide legitimacy to
right.
The more you talk.
Right. But not in Turkey, and not in the United States or Europe, but obviously in Turkey. And so I decided to ignore it, right? And of course, it hasn't ended. But even if I had done something, and I don't know what it is I could have done, right? Given the fact that I'm here and I can't travel to Turkey, and given the fact that the justice system in Turkey is not a justice system anymore, now we see it very evident, very openly. So there wasn't very much I would do. However, now, just like I'm talking to you about this, right, I have been more vocal. I have to be careful because I also don't want to hurt Osman or anybody else, right? People who are seen to have any connection to me, even if it's on Twitter, get attacked by all kinds of government supporters who are saying, you see, Henri Barkey has retweeted you, then you must be
Suspect.
He's a suspect, you must be in cahoots with him. So, but now what I would like to happen is for the indictment to be translated into English and French and Italian, whatever, and for people to read it. See, most of the think tankers, a lot of very few, some professors obviously know Turkish, but most people who work on Turkey in think tanks do not know Turkish, right? And they have no comprehension of what the indictment involves. If the indictment is translated into English, then people are going to really realize how outrageous the Turkish justice system is, right? How that there is no such thing as the rule of law in Turkey anymore, right? So that, to me, is what I would like to see happen, and I haven't figured out how. I've started talking to people to people about this, and I hope I don't have the time to obviously to translate, and it's not my job or my it's beyond my capabilities, obviously. But I think if that happens, it will be the first step towards, shall we say, vindication, trying to save some people from this terrible burden. The other thing, I should also say, to me, what's very funny, of course, is that they want 3 life terms, aggravated life terms, plus 20 years. What is it that do you think we're going to be reincarnated, and then we're going to come after the first life term, we're going to come back and act
reborn,
again?
Get reborn.
Exactly, reincarnated, be reborn again. It is stupid. It's beyond stupid. So we'll see. I hope that the fact that there's been this indictment again, and in a way, the fact that they've now connected me to Osman in a very direct way is going to attract more attention abroad to this issue. And let's also face it. The reason this indictment came out when it did is because the government was afraid that Osman might be released. So they had to come up with another excuse. Having kept him in jail for 3 years, they were worried that he was going to come out. So they put this indictment together, and you see that this indictment, is so poorly written, organized, and has no proof in it, right? But it serves a purpose of the government, which is to keep Osman in jail. I ask people, what is it that clearly it must be Erdogan? What is it that Erdogan has against Osman? And nobody can really answer that question. We really don't know why Osman is being targeted, right? Obviously it's because he represents something. He represents, a successful business person who has organized civil society organizations, and the government sees civil society essentially as a threat. But that's not enough to keep somebody in jail for as long as they have, and to continue to persecute him this long. So it is a mystery, I have to say.
Mm. Well, mystery too, regarding many others as well.
Right.
There are, as I said, nearly 50,000.
And there's Selahattin Demirtas. Well, he's a political opponent, and
there is Selahattin Demirtas, former ex-chair of the pro-Kurdish HDP party. There is Ahmet Altan, an author whose books have been translated into 23 languages, a prominent, one of the best novelists in Turkey. And Osman Kavala and many other people.
Well, in Ahmet Altan's case, what is it? They accuse him of sending subliminal messages the day before the coup. Please tell me, in what court of law, anywhere in the world, you can prove subliminal messages? By definition, you can't prove subliminal messages. I may be giving you a subliminal message now, or sending a subliminal message to the rest of your viewership. How are you going to prove that? But that is the number one accusation against Ahmet Altan. What kind of justice system uses the accusation of subliminal messages when you can't prove a subliminal? By definition, you cannot prove a subliminal message.
There have been many analyses and reports about the Turkey's collapsing judicial system. Some people agree to just claim that it is a ruin already.
Yes.
And also the most recently European Union so-called progress report, which is these days issued every second year. The latest one is deserving to be titled Regress Report, actually, because it's large parts of it is describing the Turkish justice system as a wreck, basically. And the question that we can end our conversation here, Henri, is how long do you think this torment will go on for these underdogs, for these oppressed people, wasting time in jail, just because of their ideas, thoughts, opinions, expressions, or for their use of assembly, being part of legal parties, etc.
Well, nothing will happen until the Turkish government pays a price for it. And what do I mean by paying a price? It's not necessarily, maybe you can think of maybe European sanctions especially, but it has to do with what really is going on. And I think people in Turkey may not be, or some people realize it, but not most, is that there's been an enormous reputational damage done to Turkey over the last few years. Whenever you read a newspaper or a think tank article about, in general, about authoritarian leaders, they always use three leaders as examples of modern day authoritarianism. China's Xi, Russia's Putin, and Turkey's Erdogan. The three are always cited together. Nancy Pelosi did that the other day. Right?
Same category.
Right? And everybody, in the American Congress, this is now accepted wisdom that Turkey is no longer a democracy. Now, Turkey or Turkish leaders may not think that they will be paying a price for this, but they will be paying a price, because if you are an investor and you want to invest in Turkey and you realize there is no rule of law, that they're capable of bringing out indictments like this one, that Turkey is now considered an authoritarian leader, no longer a democracy, and therefore anything can happen to you tomorrow. I think interest in Turkey as an economic, shall we say, destination for investment will decline. And look, Turkey has made an enormous amount of progress. It is one of the 20 largest economies in the world. So it is in many ways for short-term benefits for the government in terms of or pleasure of keeping some people they don't like in prison, they've done so much damage to their own reputation, right? So imagine, Turkey, which, even in the indictment, they say we are a secular democracy. No, you're not a democracy anymore. Nobody thinks of you as a democracy, right? When people talk about a conference of democracies next year, if there's a change of government here, right, Turkey will not be invited, right? And is that the message that Turkey wants to send to the rest of the world? We're no longer in democracy and we're proud of it.
We shall see how this story develops. Thank you for taking your time for this conversation, Professor Henri Barkey, for a long time with Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and senior analyst with the Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.